Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called He Wanted the Files. In December of 2020, I was working as a stress engineer, ensuring the designs were strong enough. I'd been working from home in the UK for about 6 months due to lockdowns. A week before Christmas, I got a call from the contracting agency I was working with. My contract wasn't going to be renewed. Now, I was part of a small team, and one of my teammates was, well, let's just say he loved the sound of his own voice. He'd use big fancy words and try to impress the client with his long-winded explanations. I, on the other hand, stuck to the facts and kept things simple. The whole project was a mess. The client kept changing their mind about how they wanted things done, and as a contractor, I had to follow their lead. I never found out why they let me go, but I have a good idea. The constant delays and changes were likely blamed on me, and my overly verbose colleague must have convinced them that he was more valuable. This guy was a real piece of work. At one point I was asked to review his analysis. I found errors, corrected them and sent them back. He did not appreciate that. Instead of using my corrected method, which was simpler and accurate, he spent 2 days buried in a math textbook, trying to come up with a more complex solution that essentially did the same thing. A few days later we were chatting over coffee, and he proudly told me that the client was really impressed with his metrics method. I couldn't believe it. He had wasted 2 days of the client's money and taken credit for an overly complicated version of what I'd already solved. But, of course, he stayed on the project while I was the one let go. Fast forward 4 months. I'd been out of work for a while, doing everything I could to support my family, including working tough shifts at a warehouse. Money was tight, and my eldest even had to dip into his trust fund to help us out. Then one day, out of the blue, I get a call from my former boss. Hey, how it's going? Remember that analysis you did? Do you still have the files? The client lost them. I was floored. After months of silence and no support, suddenly he wanted my help. I told him I had the files, but mentioned they weren't the latest versions. He was happy enough with that and asked me to send them over. So I did. But here's the thing. I knew something he didn't. I'd written a bit of code to sift through all the output files and extract the results we needed. I sent him 40 outdated files, knowing full well he'd have to manually comb through them for the relevant data, which would take him ages. And honestly, I couldn't help but smile at the thought. The next story is called Any Spare Change? Back in 2003, I came home after my first year of college. I decided to switch schools and pursue a degree at a local music tech college. I moved back in with my parents and commuted into the city every day. To save on parking fees, I bought a permit to park in a church lot about 10 blocks from campus, which meant I had a nice walk to class each day. About a week into the semester, while walking to school and smoking a cigarette, a homeless man suddenly appeared beside me, probably in his late 50s. Scruffy salt and pepper hair, wearing a flannel jacket, snow pants, and some work boots with no laces. He leaned in and asked, "Hey buddy, can I get a smoke?" I was 19 and feeling a little cocky, so I told him he could have one, but only if he walked with me and kept me company while he smoked. He agreed, and off we went. We introduced ourselves and made small talk as we walked. When we got close to school, we tossed our cigarette butts, and then he leaned in again and asked, "Hey buddy, got any spare change?" I told him I didn't, which was true. I kept all my spare change in glass milk jugs back at home. We parted ways, and I didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, this guy had memorized my class schedule. Every day, without fail, he'd meet me at the same corner, ask for a smoke, walk with me, and then ask for change. And every day I had no change to give him. This routine went on for nearly 15 months, as my school didn't have summer breaks. Fast forward to a few weeks before graduation. It's the end of winter and I'm getting ready for class. I grab my leather trench coat, sling my bag over my shoulder and notice the 2 milk jugs overflowing with coins by the door. I looked at my coat's big pockets and then back at the change jars. That's when I had an idea. I dumped both milk jugs into my pockets. You wouldn't believe how heavy 2 gallons of change are. But I was committed, so I headed off to school, trying my best not to jingle as I walked. Sure enough, he met me at the corner. As usual, I gave him a smoke and we walked together. The whole time I'm trying to keep a straight face, barely able to contain my laughter. Finally, we reached the school. We tossed our cigarettes and he turned to me, grinning. Hey buddy, gotta ask, got any change? That's when I told him, alright, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you all the change in my pockets. But you have to promise never to ask me for change again. Deal? He nodded eagerly and held out one hand, palm up. I chuckled and said, no, you don't understand. I have a lot of change. So he cupped both hands together. But I still shook my head and said, no, really, I have a lot of change. Still confused, he gave me a questioning look. So I lifted up the bottom of his sweatshirt, made him hold it like a hammock, and then began shoveling handfuls of coins into it. His eyes went wide with disbelief. I just kept going, handful after handful. Just when he thought I was done, I switched to my other pocket. Coins clattered to the ground, echoing between the buildings, and we were both laughing uncontrollably. After I finished, he thanked me, waddled off with all the change weighing him down, and I headed to class. The next day, the sun was shining, and I was walking with a big smile on my face. When I got to the corner, there he was, smiling just as wide. He leaned in with the same grin and said, hey buddy, can I get a smoke? Long pause. Yeah buddy, you can have a smoke. The third story is called Never Learned His Lesson. Years ago, when I was working at a gym, a buddy of mine came in to work out. It was a quiet time of day, and the gym was pretty small. The layout was split into 2 sections. One side had benches, dumbbells and barbells, while the other had machines, all divided by a large U-shaped bar. Now, my friend is a great guy, but he had a tendency to overestimate his abilities. He'd recently hit a big milestone, benching 100 kilograms, and he wanted to repeat it that day. Knowing him well, I asked if he wanted me to spot him, since it's always smart to have a spotter when you are lifting near your max. But in true confident fashion, he said, no, I feel really strong today. I don't need a spotter. I double checked. Are you sure? He was adamant. Nope, I've got this. No help needed. I offered one more time, but he was set on doing it solo. So I went over to the other side of the gym and waited. It didn't take long before I heard him groaning, puffing, and eventually he shouted my name, asking for help. Like a good friend, I rushed over, and sure enough, there he was, completely stuck, with the barbell resting on his chest, looking totally helpless. I couldn't help but laugh for a good 10 seconds before finally lifting the bar off him. We both cracked up afterward, but the best part, he never learned his lesson. The last story is called Just Following Orders. The company I work for was recently acquired. Before that, it was a profitable business with a fantastic culture. People were happy, things were efficient, and work felt meaningful. But when the new owners took over, they decided the company was a disaster and needed fixing with structure, hierarchy, and order. They brought in a new CEO who fired all of our old managers and hired a fresh MBA grad to manage our department. Enter Bob, a classic company man from the acquiring firm. Instead of taking the time to understand how things worked, who was doing what, how our processes flowed, or even why things were set up the way they were, Bob decided to rule with fear. He accused us of inefficiencies and laziness, often implying we should be working longer hours just to prove ourselves. Micromanaging became his specialty, even though he didn't fully grasp what we did. Bob loves to preach, He goes on about MBA management techniques, leadership, standardization, metrics, AI automation, you name it. If it sounds good on paper, Bob's all over it. But here's the catch. He doesn't actually do anything. He just talks. He manages, but fails to lead. Because of how Bob operates, we've all become yes men. We keep our heads down, nodding and smiling, while he drones on with his endless stream of buzzwords and corporate jargon. The best part of every meeting is when he talks right up until the last second of the scheduled time. But on rare occasions when a meeting ends early, he'll tell us, "I'm giving you some time back," as if he owns our time while we are at work. Bob loves being involved in everything, but not in a productive way. He just wants credit for everything. So we decided to give him exactly what he wanted. From that day on, everyone in our department started asking Bob for input on everything. We CC'd him on every email, whether it was important or not. If you need a basic approval, ask Bob. If you need to update a vendor's credit application, let's keep Bob in the loop. Even when we didn't need his involvement, we made sure Bob knew about it. Bob also loves meetings, so we invite him to as many as possible, especially ones where we know he'll go off on long, irrelevant tangents. Every trivial matter becomes a big discussion. We make sure Bob has plenty of opportunities to hear his own voice and feel like he's making a difference. The beauty of this approach was that Bob gets what he wants. He feels important, involved and busy. Meanwhile, we get to sit back, create a mountain of pointless paperwork, and enjoy a little extra downtime while Bob spins his wheels. And Bob ends up being responsible for everything, because, after all, he's involved in all of it. We are just following orders. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.